Hook opening, 20 seconds, emotional pacing, American English tone. Hi, I'm Rosalyn. I bought a house, quietly, privately, because I needed something that was mine. But 2 weeks after I handed myself the keys, my mother handed my sister one. Then I found out they were planning to move me out of my own home. They said I didn't need a house, that I had no family. And for a while, I almost believed them. What they didn't know was, I was listening, and I was documenting everything. You want to know what happened next? Keep watching. I bought the house in secret. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I needed something that was mine. After years of being the fallback, the one who made room, who gave up space, who said, "It's fine, don't worry about me." I wanted a key that only opened for me. I didn't tell my mother or my sister. I didn't even tell Silas, my closest friend. It wasn't rebellion, it was survival. The decision wasn't made in bitterness, but in silence, the kind you sit in when you finally realize you've been too loud about everyone else and too quiet about yourself. The first time I walked through that front door, alone, keys in hand, I remember pausing in the middle of the empty living room. No voices, no footsteps behind me, just stillness. And for the first time in years, I didn't have to brace for anyone's opinion. Someone once told me, "Your home should be your sanctuary. Not everyone gets to choose who they let in." So I didn't. I chose peace. And this place, this small house in Asheville with uneven floorboards and a chipped mailbox, it was going to be my clean slate. A quiet start, with walls that only echoed back what I wanted them to. 2 weeks later, I got the call. "Rosie, honey, I hate to ask, but my apartment's a mess. Plumbing's shot. Can I crash at your place for a few weeks?" It was my mother, Margine. Her voice was warm, like always, sweetened guilt wrapped in southern charm. I hesitated. I shouldn't have. But I did. "Just a few weeks," she promised. When she arrived, it wasn't with a duffel bag. It was 4 suitcases and a moving truck. Small, but a truck nonetheless. "Oh, I know, it looks like a lot," she laughed. "You know I always overpack. This is temporary, baby. Promise." I didn't say much, just smiled, held the door, and helped carry in boxes I hadn't asked for. She filled the guest room in under an hour. By sundown, the coat rack had her favorite shawl on it, and my living room smelled like her lavender oil instead of lemon cleaner. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt different, not unsafe, just unfamiliar, like I was staying in someone else's place, someone who liked too many pillows and played gospel radio late at night while folding laundry that wasn't mine. Within days, the house began to shift. "This plant would look better in the kitchen," she said, moving it without waiting for a reply. She pulled down the framed photo I had of me and Silas in front of the Smokies, replaced it with a studio shot of Delaney, her husband Coulter, and their daughter Hollis, all dressed in matching navy. "I figured you wouldn't mind," she smiled. "It brings warmth, don't you think?" I bit my tongue. One afternoon, I found my monogram table runner, the one Gran stitched herself with RMG in gold thread, folded into a drawer. "It's just a little too formal, maybe," Mom said when I brought it up. "This place feels more casual." I nodded, said nothing. But inside, a little part of me folded too. I started walking around the house slower, like I was trying to memorize how it used to be before it changed without my permission. Then came the dinner. It was a Thursday. I came home from work, arms full of groceries, only to hear laughter echoing from the dining room. Delaney, Coulter, Hollis, Mom, wine glasses clinked. Music played, some 90s pop song Delaney always loved. My front door had been unlocked. "Rosalyn!" Mom called out from the kitchen like I was a neighbor dropping by. Delaney's friend, someone I didn't recognize, stood up. "You must be the sister staying here. Delaney told me you're helping out while she gets settled." "Staying here? The table was set for 7, my plate still in the drying rack, my chair not there. I smiled, made some excuse about being tired, and went upstairs. I didn't eat. I didn't even change. I sat on the edge of my bed, now cluttered with baby toys and laundry that didn't belong to me, and stared at the wall until it blurred. That night, I walked the halls of my house like a stranger. The pictures, the scent, the conversations, they all belonged to someone else. I wanted to say something. I stood in the doorway of the guest room, rehearsing lines that sounded mature but firm, lines that wouldn't make me the dramatic one again, but none of them fit. Instead, I curled up under the throw blanket that used to be on my couch, now buried beneath a stack of throw pillows in a color I didn't choose. The house had my name on the deed, but that night, it felt like I'd never lived here. I came home early that day. A client call had been canceled, so I decided to grab lunch at the little deli near the park and head back before the rain hit. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar SUV already there. Delaney's. Inside, the kitchen lights were on. The faint sound of a drawer opening, silverware clinking. I stepped through the door, and there she was, barefoot, tossing something into the trash with one hand and opening the fridge with the other. "Oh, hey," she chirped, like this was her Saturday routine. I asked, "How'd you get in?" "Mom gave me a key," she replied casually, like it was nothing. "She thought it'd be helpful." Helpful. That word did something to me. My feet stayed planted on the mat, but something in me shifted. I hadn't given a spare key to anyone, not even Silas. That key wasn't just a piece of metal, it was peace of mind, my line in the sand. She leaned against the island and looked around. "You know, we could totally expand this countertop if you ever wanted to go full open concept." "We?" I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat tightened. I didn't want to sound petty. I didn't want to be the one who always took things too seriously. After she left, I went straight to the back of the hallway closet and checked my emergency key stash. Still there. I stood there holding it, wondering just how many other copies existed now. 3 days later, I opened my bedroom door and stopped cold. The bed had a new duvet, white with pink polka dots. Hollis's name was stitched into the pillow. On the floor, her toys were scattered across the rug like landmines. The bookshelf I'd spent weeks organizing now held stuffed animals and picture books. My closet was open. My clothes were folded neatly and stacked inside 2 plastic bins, shoved into the guest room. Delaney stood in the doorway behind me. "I figured you'd be more comfortable in the guest room." "Hollis needs space to play," Margine's voice called out from the hallway. "You're always working anyway, sweetie. The guest room's quieter." I didn't speak. My heart was pounding, not out of fear, but disbelief. I stood there in silence, like someone trying to figure out if this was real or a joke that had gone too far. No one laughed. I turned, walked down the hall, closed the door to the guest room without a word. Later that night, I wandered through the house. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, just hollow. My favorite armchair was missing from the corner of the living room. I found it in the garage, covered with boxes labeled Delaney, Winter. The side table had been moved. My coffee maker was now on the bottom shelf, behind a pile of protein powder canisters. I barely recognized the space I designed piece by piece. Upstairs, I passed by the study just in time to hear my mother on the phone. Her voice was soft, almost affectionate. "It's just easier this way. We're all in one place. Delaney's doing so much. I'm proud of her." That word again. Proud. There was no mention of me. I walked out to the porch and sat down on the steps. A light drizzle was starting, but I didn't move. I remembered choosing the paint for the porch railing, holding samples up in sunlight. I remembered imagining long mornings here, coffee in hand, in silence. Now the porch held plastic toys, mismatched chairs, and a baby stroller that squeaked when it moved. When people stay long enough, I thought, they stop asking. They just move things. I considered changing the locks. Really thought about it. But I wasn't ready for that kind of war. I opened my laptop that night, typed out a message to Delaney, straightforward, clear, firm. Then I read it again, and deleted it. I wasn't ready to be called dramatic, not yet, so I slept on the couch. The bed in the guest room creaked every time I turned, and I couldn't bring myself to lie beneath the canopy of pink stuffed unicorns. As I curled up, I noticed the table runner again, the monogrammed one Gran had stitched years ago. It was folded beneath Hollis's art set, covered in glitter glue and dried Play-Doh. They hadn't thrown it away, just repurposed it. Somehow that felt worse. I laid there in the dark and thought to myself, maybe this is how erasure works, not with shouting, but with good intentions and steady hands. The rain had been tapping against the windows since noon. That slow, steady kind that never really stops, just soaks everything until it's heavy. I was heading toward the kitchen for tea when I passed Hollis's room. The door was slightly ajar. I paused. Something crackled inside, soft and rhythmic. Then I recognized the sound, static. Years ago, I'd given Margine an old baby monitor after her surgery. I didn't even know it still worked. But there it was, blinking red from the bookshelf, catching the conversation happening between my mother and Delaney on the other side of the house. "She won't fight it," Margine said, her voice lowered but not cautious. "She never does. Once she adjusts, she'll realize this house was never really hers." A pause. Then Delaney laughed. "Let her keep the deed. We'll have the control." I didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. I stood there as the weight of those words settled in my bones. Not fresh, but familiar. They weren't reacting. They were planning, and I'd been standing still. I turned away from the door and walked back down the hall. My tea could wait. There are moments that leave bruises without impact. That one left me sore without a mark. The next day, it was still raining. I stepped onto the porch to grab the mail. A bundle of envelopes wrapped in a rubber band, damp along the edges. Inside, between a power bill and a magazine I never subscribed to, was a packet addressed to Delaney Cade, primary resident. At my address, the contents were worse. A Medicaid application with my house listed as her residence, school district forms for Hollis, a utility transfer sheet marked pending co-signature. I stood at the counter, flipping through pages like someone discovering a crime scene in their own home. I logged into my electric account. A new co-user request. Name, Delaney Cade. It didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a signature written over mine. My hand hovered over the cancel request button. I didn't click it. Instead, I took screenshots of everything, front and back, time-stamped, backed them up to a folder named In Case. I didn't want a war, but I wasn't going to be defenseless. Later that evening, the light faded into that odd gray blue you only see after storms. I lit a single lamp in the living room and stared at the space that used to feel like mine. I thought back to the day I closed on the house. The banker had shaken my hand, smiling, saying, "Now it's really yours." I'd held that paper like a vow. Now, people knocked on the door and asked for Delaney. UPS drivers called her name. A neighbor asked if I was still visiting. Margine had invited someone from church over. I overheard her say, "Rosalyn's been so kind to let us stay while we figure things out." Stay? Figure things out? I stood by the doorway, unseen, unheard, repeating silently. I own this house. I signed for this house. I pay for this house. But it doesn't matter what the deed says if everyone else is reading a different story. That night, I opened my messages and started a text to Silas. How do you fight a takeover that doesn't use violence, only suggestion? I stared at the blinking cursor. Then I closed the app. I walked into the hallway and checked the footage on my phone. The camera above the front door had recorded Margine unlocking the door for Delaney. She didn't knock. She didn't wait, just walked in like it was hers. Still, I said nothing. I didn't change the locks. I didn't confront anyone. Because here's the thing they never understood. If I exploded now, I'd become the villain in the story they were writing. The ungrateful daughter. The dramatic sister. The one who snapped. But if I waited, if I let the rope tighten just a little more, maybe they'd wrap themselves in it. Wednesday started like most others. Gray, quiet, slow. I was in the middle of a client Zoom call when the internet dropped. Not slowed, dropped. Dead signal. I waited a minute. Then another. Still nothing. I checked my modem. Lights were fine. Pulled up the Wi-Fi list. My network was still there, but locked. Password had changed. I texted Delaney. She replied in seconds. Mom reset it. Said yours was too hard to remember. Thought it'd help. There it was again. That word. Help. Like every violation of boundary came with a warm smile and a pat on the back. Helpful. I stood up and walked to the back porch. Delaney was out there, lounging with Hollis, watching something on her laptop, completely absorbed. She looked up and waved like we were just two old friends sharing space. Oh, didn't mean to lock you out. Thought you were at the cafe today anyway. I didn't respond. Just stared for a beat longer than necessary, then turned away. They weren't borrowing space. They were deciding how much I got to use. That night, I went to hang up my coat and paused at the closet door. It felt heavier. Inside, a large plastic tub blocked the floor, labeled neatly with Delaney's handwriting. Spring storage. I opened a drawer. My sweaters were bunched at the bottom, shoved beneath Hollis's raincoats. Several of my shoes were missing. In their place, her boots, her bags, her scent. I leaned forward, trying to find the blouse I wore for interviews. Gone. Probably donated. I stepped onto a stool and reached up to the top shelf. That's when I saw it. My grandmother's table runner. The monogrammed one. Folded, crushed under two of Delaney's sun hats. Margine appeared behind me like a ghost in good lighting. You always said you wanted to simplify your wardrobe, she said with that voice that made everything sound reasonable, but the air around her felt cold, like her words carried condensation. I didn't reply, didn't even nod. Just took the runner down and walked out. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than I had in weeks. Reclaiming space doesn't always look like war. Sometimes it starts with the smallest shifts. I moved the runner back to the dining table, replaced the pillows in the living room with my own. Hung the old photo of me and Gran in the hallway, where Delaney's canvas print of her family vacation used to be. By 8 a.m., Marjane was up. She walked into the kitchen, looked around, and said, I thought we agreed on the new look. I was standing by the coffee pot. We didn't, I said plainly. You decided, I tolerated. She blinked. Just once. Then smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Don't be dramatic, Rosalyn. You're acting like a stranger in your own home. I looked at her, really looked, and thought, that's exactly what I've become, a stranger. Not because I left, but because I stayed too long in a space they kept shifting without asking. That evening, I sat at the dining table with a legal pad, made a list, not of changes, but of trespasses. Gran used to say, don't confuse kindness with silence. One's a virtue, the other's a cage. I had confused them for too long. I listed every piece of furniture moved, every key copied, every decision made for me, without me. It was a long list. At the bottom, I wrote just 3 words. It ends now. I logged into the router, typed in the admin password, stared at the reset option. I hovered, breathed, but didn't click. Not yet. They'd notice. And I wasn't ready to start that war, not if I didn't have every piece in place. I closed the laptop, put the list in my desk drawer. I hadn't lost control because I was blind. I'd lost it because I'd let them write the rules without contest. Not anymore. The mailbox was leaning again. I'd told myself for months I'd fix it. That morning, though, it wasn't the tilt that bothered me. It was the envelope. Cream-colored, embossed, weighty, formal. I walked inside, tossed my keys into the bowl, and opened it right there by the sink. The envelope was addressed to the home of Delaney Cade. My address, my house. Inside was a wedding invitation, not a new wedding, a vow renewal, hosted by Margene and Delaney. At my house, I looked over every corner of the invite, the co-hosts, the printed address, the RSVP line. There wasn't a single mention of me, no with the support of Rosalyn, no thanks to her gracious hospitality, not even a hint. They didn't forget. They rewrote. I stood there, holding it like it might dissolve if I stared hard enough. Then I walked out to the car, sat in the driver's seat, and closed the door. Rain started to tap the windshield again. Same soft drizzle that never fully left this town in spring. And I stayed in the car for half an hour with the engine off. Just breathing. That envelope sat in my lap like a verdict. When I finally went back inside, the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt hollow. Later that day, I was pouring cereal when Margene came into the kitchen, humming. She didn't look up when she spoke. Make sure you're around Saturday morning. We'll need help setting up for the vow renewal. I looked at her, quietly. Was it an error? I asked, holding up the invitation. The address? The names? She blinked, smiled like she always did when she was about to insult me with sugar on top. Well, you're not exactly the hosting type, honey. You don't have a family of your own. There it was, like a switch flipped inside me. Not rage, not even sadness, just emptiness. I wanted to ask her what she thought I was, but deep down, I was scared she'd answer. So I turned, walked away, and let the spoon clink quietly into the sink. I didn't cry in front of her, wouldn't give her that, but upstairs, behind my locked door, the tears came. Not many, just enough to remind me I still had something left to lose. That night, I moved into the sunroom. I told Delaney it was for the morning light, but it was really because I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the pink guest room. And my own bedroom. That had long since stopped being mine. The couch in the sunroom squeaked when I turned, but it was still mine. For now. I noticed my work calendar was gone from the wall. A new one had been pinned, flower-themed, full of handwriting that wasn't mine. My office chair was missing. A cheap swivel chair sat in its place, lower, stiffer. Delaney's voice echoed more than mine now. Her laughter, her stories. She told Hollis to grab things from our kitchen, not Auntie's kitchen, and no one corrected her. One evening, as I was pruning the hydrangeas by the porch, a neighbor strolled past. She waved, smiling. Tell Delaney the flowers by the driveway look great. They really brighten up the place. I smiled back. Tight. Inside, I sat at the table with a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring at the unlit candle in the center. I used to picture dinners there, maybe with someone I loved, or even just quiet nights with books and takeout. Now I just hoped the house wouldn't finish swallowing me whole. The next morning, Silas showed up. Unannounced, as always. Coffee in hand, eyes soft. He didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me on the porch. The invitation was still sitting on the coffee table, unopened since I'd first placed it there. He glanced at it, then looked at me. You're not invisible, he said. They're just pretending long enough for you to believe it. I didn't reply. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. If you walk away now, you're letting them be right about you. Still nothing from me. Then his voice dropped, just above a whisper. Don't give them the ending they're trying to write. That night, I sat alone at the table, unfolded the monogrammed runner, laid it across the table, smooth, centered, lit one candle, didn't say grace, didn't make a toast. I just sat there and listened, to the silence, to myself. It was my day off. I'd run out to grab laundry detergent and a sandwich from the corner shop, 20, maybe 25 minutes tops. The rain had stopped, sky turning that soft gold you get before summer settles in for real. When I came back home, my front door was wide open. Not ajar, open. At first, I thought someone forgot to close it properly, but as I stepped inside, I heard voices. Not Margene, not Delaney, strangers. A woman was measuring the dining room wall. Another man, young with a camera slung across his chest, was snapping photos from the front window. I stood there, still holding my grocery bag, unsure if I'd walked into my house or someone else's. Then I heard her. Delaney. This'll be the breakfast nook. Over there, we're thinking about a wraparound bench, maybe some white shiplap. I want it bright in the mornings. I watched her point like a realtor giving a tour of a model home, smiling, confident, and not once did she glance toward the front door. No one did, until I said, "Can I help you with something?" They turned. The woman dropped her measuring tape. Delaney didn't flinch. "Oh," she said with a little laugh. "This is Trisha and Caleb. They're helping us with layout options if we stay." If we stay, us. I didn't speak, didn't correct her. I walked to the counter, picked up my keys, and stepped back out onto the porch. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. That evening, while taking out the trash, Mrs. Langford from across the street waved me down. "Hey, Rosalyn," she called. "Saw the invite for the open house in my mailbox. Looks like you're hosting something soon?" I didn't know what she was talking about. She handed me a folded flyer. Ink still fresh. The headline read, Open House Design Preview, hosted by Margene Gale Delaney Cade. Venue, the Cade Residence. My address, my porch, my home, but not my name. Not anywhere. Not in the credits. Not even in fine print. I stood in my kitchen under the yellow light, staring at the flyer, reading it again and again. They weren't ashamed. They were proud of the takeover. That night, I lit a fire in the pit behind the garage. I didn't rage. I didn't curse. I just folded that flyer once, twice, and dropped it in. I watched it burn slow, but I didn't throw away the ashes. I poured them into a mason jar and tucked it into the back of my closet. Next morning, I changed the lock on my bedroom door. Quietly, deliberately. I reprogrammed the garage remote, resetting it to factory settings. Didn't announce any of it, just acted. I started digging through my documents, insurance papers, the deed, bank statements. Read the fine print I hadn't looked at since closing. Underlined every sentence that tied my name to this house. Silas came by that afternoon. Saw the folders spread out across my kitchen table. He didn't ask. He just nodded once and slid a manila envelope across the table before leaving. The tab read, Options. Later that evening, Margene wandered past the back patio, noticed the ash in the fire pit. "What were you burning?" she asked, too casually. "Unnecessary paper," I said, not looking up. It wasn't about noise anymore. It was about precision. After that, things shifted. Delaney didn't push anymore. She started, softening. The jokes came slower. The entitlement got quieter, which made her moves even sharper. I wasn't in the group texts anymore. Plans were made without me. Conversations ended when I walked into a room. I overheard Hollis one afternoon while coloring at the table. Mom says we might live here forever. Isn't that so cool? I smiled at her and said gently, only if you ask the person who owns it first. She smiled back, too young to catch the weight. Margine looked up from the other side of the kitchen, spoon tapping her teacup. It's still just a house, Rosalyn. Don't hold it so tight. I met her eyes and said nothing, because it wasn't the walls I was holding. It was my name, stitched into every beam they were trying to paint over. It was early, too early for anything loud, the kind of morning where the whole house holds its breath. I was passing the living room to refill my coffee when I saw it. A new frame, centered, hung just above the mantel. Margine, Delaney, Coulter, and Hollis. All smiling, all standing in front of my house, and me, nowhere in the photo, not even a mention. They stood under the porch I painted, in front of the windows I replaced. Behind them, the door I unlocked the day I signed the deed. They looked happy, like a family that owned something together. I froze mid-step. No one had said a word about it, not Delaney, not Margine. It wasn't a gallery of memories. It was a billboard. I remembered Gran saying once, sometimes omission is the most violent form of betrayal. She was right. I didn't cry. Instead, I took out my phone, snapped a picture of the portrait, and sent it to Silas. No text, no caption, just proof. Because this wasn't about a wall or a photo anymore. This was about erasure. It didn't stop there. Later that day, while I was trimming the hedges, Mrs. Langford walked over from across the street with a box of napkins. Saw y'all are hosting that backyard brunch soon, she said, handing me the box. Thought you might need extras. Margine said Delaney bought the place to help her out. I blinked. Quiet. Then said, flat as a stone, I bought the house. She paused, visibly unsure. Oh, that's not what I heard. I didn't correct her further, just thanked her for the napkins and turned back toward the house. I spent the next hour going through old community emails, digging, asking around, carefully. Turns out Margine had been building a little history of her own, one where Delaney was the homeowner and I was just passing through, a bit unstable, between jobs, not well. Poor thing, she apparently told someone at church. Delaney took her in. Family takes care of their own. Takes care of their own. I stood in the backyard with that phrase echoing like static in my ears. Like I should have been grateful. When they rewrite your story, they don't just steal your words, they take your place in people's memory. That evening, I printed out a copy of the deed. Black ink, 2 pages, all caps. Rosalyn Gale, owner. I taped it behind the portrait. On the back of the frame, tucked neatly, invisible but permanent. Then I installed a small camera on the bookshelf, just in case the truth got edited again. The next morning, Margine saw it. She gave a short laugh. What's this, a prank? I didn't look up from my toast. Just making sure my part of the story stays attached to the frame. She didn't laugh again. Delaney avoided eye contact all afternoon. Took Hollis out for ice cream and stayed gone until almost dark. I didn't chase them. I wasn't here to argue anymore. By Friday, I started talking, not in rants. Not in warnings, just statements. To the mailman. Yes, still the owner. Some folks forget. To the neighbor at the mailbox. If anyone's confused, feel free to stop by. I've got all the paperwork handy. To the HOA rep at the monthly meeting. I've submitted the notarized ownership letter just to clear up rumors. We can't have miscommunication in the neighborhood. And then, quietly, I changed the locks again. Didn't send an email. Didn't leave a note. Just did it. Control doesn't always come in the form of shouting. Sometimes it's as quiet as clicking a lock into place and dropping the spare key in the trash. The portrait was still there. I passed it one more time that night, didn't flinch, didn't look away. I wasn't trying to feel included anymore. I was making sure they couldn't forget me again. Sunday morning started quiet. Too quiet. You know the kind, where the silence feels like it's watching you. I was halfway through my eggs when my phone buzzed. Credit alert. Suspicious activity flagged. Mortgage inquiry under your name. I clicked the link. Someone had filed for a refinancing request using my address. My social security number. I opened my credit account. Coulter's name was on a co-signer flag. I sat back in my chair and stared at the wall. For maybe a full minute. Then I checked my credit card app. There was a charge from 3 days ago. Ashley's Furniture. Almost $2,000. Signed electronically. Delaney. They weren't just living in my home. They were stealing my name. And right there, over half-eaten eggs, everything inside me stopped being soft. I called them in that afternoon. No yelling, just said, "We need to talk." Margene and Delaney sat on the couch like it was just another Sunday. Hollis was at a friend's house. Perfect timing. I laid out 3 printouts on the coffee table. Credit report, co-signer request, the furniture receipt. Delaney squinted. "We were just trying to help. It's just paperwork." Margene nodded. "You weren't doing anything with that equity anyway." My voice was level. "You've confused access with ownership. That ends now." Margene leaned forward, hands folded like she was about to give a lecture. "What's family if not shared resources?" I stood up. "Family without respect is just trespassing in fancier clothes." Neither of them responded. I didn't wait for them to. That night, I took the notarized deed out of my file box and set it on the dining table. I highlighted my name, the dates, the signatures. Outside, I prepped the fire pit. I printed copies of every form they touched, mortgage apps, credit logs, bills changed behind my back, laid them out on the bench beside the fire pit. At sunset, I lit them. One by one. The flame caught quick. Pages curled, turned to smoke. I didn't cry. I didn't breathe heavy. I filmed the whole thing with my phone. 30 seconds, posted it privately. Caption: restoring what never should have been challenged. By morning, neighbors were whispering. Silas sent me 3 contacts, lawyers. HOA emailed to confirm homeowner status, asked if I wanted to update their records. I didn't respond to Margene's texts, didn't open Delaney's missed calls. By Wednesday, I replaced every lock in the house. The front, the back, the garage keypad was disabled. I rerouted every utility bill to my lawyer's office. The mailbox, swapped out. New key, new nameplate. Friday afternoon, I was rearranging the bookshelves when I heard the rattle of a key at the front door. Delaney's key didn't work. She knocked twice, then tried again. Silence. An hour later, Margene called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. "This is cruel, Rosalyn. We're family. You're going to regret this." I didn't reply. Instead, I mailed them a plain white envelope. Inside, I placed one item, a full-color copy of the deed, and a yellow sticky note. 3 lines. My name, my walls, my rules. I sealed the envelope, walked it to the mailbox, and let the flag up. Didn't look back, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The knock came just after lunch. A man in a polo shirt and khakis stood on the porch, clipboard in hand. "Delivery for a Rosalyn Gale." I signed. He handed over a medium-sized cardboard box, scuffed at the corners. No return address, but the logo on the side read, "Second Chances Consignment." I didn't need to open it. I already knew. Still, I carried it to the dining room and cut the tape. Inside were dishes I'd inherited from Gran. Her quilted robe, the blue one with the frayed cuffs. A crystal candy jar I thought had been lost during the move. And on top, a note. Margene's handwriting. These things don't match the new decor. I sat down slowly. No tears, no shaking, just silence. Even my memories weren't sacred to them. I folded the robe, smoothed the wrinkles. That robe had held me when I cried in my 20s, when Gran passed, when I first moved into this house. I wasn't angry. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about removal. That night, Silas and I sat on the porch. We didn't talk much, just shared a drink, watched the sun go down through the trees. He didn't ask about the box. I didn't offer. But the next morning, a clip made its way to my phone. Delaney at a neighborhood brunch, holding court like she always had. Someone asked about the house. She laughed and said, "Some people just can't share. They'd rather own than belong." The video cut right after that, but it was enough. Within hours, the comments exploded. Some sided with her. She was probably impossible to live with. Control freak vibes. But most weren't buying it. She stole her sister's house, and now she's playing victim? Rosalyn, if you're reading this, you're not alone. My phone buzzed all day. Old coworkers, neighbors, even someone from Gran's church. But one message stuck. Carol, 72. I stayed quiet for decades, too. You're showing us how to choose ourselves. Thank you. It didn't undo the mess. But it reminded me why I hadn't walked away when it would have been easier to. Later that week, Margine and Delaney asked to meet. Said they wanted to talk things through. I agreed, but not at my house. We met at a cafe downtown, the kind where the coffee comes in ceramic mugs and nobody minds if you take up the table for too long. They arrived 5 minutes late. Margine wore pearls, Delaney, sunglasses on her head like a crown. They sat, smiled, started with the usual. "We never meant to hurt you. It all got out of hand. You were always private." They offered apologies wrapped in excuses. I listened, didn't interrupt, and when it was my turn, I leaned forward. "You didn't just take my space, you tried to take my place. And now we're done writing each other's stories." I stood up, left my coffee untouched, didn't look back. 2 days later, I hosted a dinner. Nothing fancy, just Silas, a couple of neighbors, and me. The runner Gran embroidered sat in the center of the table, freshly ironed. A new photo hung on the wall. Just me, on the porch, laughing, mid-blink. No edits, no one missing. Someone once told me your home should be your sanctuary. Mine finally was. I cleared the table, blew out the candles, and paused for a moment. Not because something hurt, but because it didn't. I am not the wound they left. I'm the healing I chose.